What is up, guys? Welcome back to Flow State. We are here with an official episode 1. You might be thinking, yes, this is technically the second episode. It's the second time you're hearing us lovely chaps talk to each other. But last week, it was kind of like breaking things in. We had a bit of an introduction episode. So if you haven't watched that already and want to get an idea of who we are, what we're about, what the podcast is going to be about, highly recommend you go back and watch that. But if you've already seen it, we won't delay any further. Today is going to be an official episode. We're going to get straight into it. Myself and Adam here are going to have a chat about just about everything. We are going to obviously focus things about running. But look, if we end up going on a few tangents, down a few rabbit holes, then so be it. We'll see where the afternoon and morning, in Adam's case, takes us. So Adam, why don't you get us started? I want to hear about how your week has been, what's been happening. Fill me in.
Yep, how's it going, Luke? And just want to thank all the lovely people that listened last week and sent us some very nice messages. If you are tuning in again, thank you. So it's I was going to say it's great to speak to you, but it's great to speak to you, Luke. And yeah, it's been a good week. It's been a busy week. You know, started our first podcast. I hosted a webinar with the athletes that I coach on Monday evening, which went really well. Of course, I forgot to record said webinar and had to get up then on Tuesday morning and re-record, but that was fine. We got that done and out for our athletes, so that was cool. So yeah, it's been a bit of a week spent in front of the camera / microphone a little bit more, which has been cool. On a running front, it's been a good week as well. I don't know about you, mate, but the midst of marathon training, all I'm doing is washing clothes. It's laundry load after laundry load.
Honestly, so just for the listeners who maybe missed that last week, Adam is running London Marathon, which is the 27th of August on Greenwich Mean Time, London time, of course. And on that very same day, but obviously Australian Eastern Standard Time, I am running the Ballarat Marathon. So technically, we're running marathons on the same day. So while our training might look a little bit different, we are lining up in spirit together.
Yeah, I listened back to last week's episode when you sent me through, the version, and is it fair to say your heart dropped a little bit when I mentioned that London was on the same day as your marathon in Ballarat? I could feel the gut wrench in your voice.
Look, honestly, I think two main things happened. I was a little bit gutted because I was like, man, whatever I do is going to be kind of overshadowed because it's the same day as London. And let's be honest, London's a major, and in my opinion, London is one of the biggest majors in the world. Obviously, London being, in my opinion, probably the second biggest capital city in the world after New York in terms of, I guess, not necessarily size, but just in terms of the tourist attraction, the scale of the city. But the second thing I was thinking about is, because you said it was less than 90 days. Again, this is my first marathon. So I'm thinking, my word, that's actually really not a very long time. And although I'm trying to not put too much pressure on it, that is still quite daunting, I suppose, because I do have goals and I do want to perform. And yeah, I feel like I'm quite a way away, even though I'm probably not as far as I think. So thoughts definitely crossed my mind while on air last week.
I could feel it in your voice. But listen, mate, you're behind us in terms of time, so hopefully you'll have the race of your life in Ballarat and you can sit up with the feet up that evening and maybe tune into the London stream with that marathon in the bag and really enjoy it.
Yeah, that's the plan. I mean, what time will that be? I think it's an 8 a.m. start typically in London.
London's actually a little bit later. I think it's more like 10 a.m. to be honest. It's quite late. It's quite late in the morning. Definitely not, we're not in tune with the Aussies yet. You guys are starting at 7 a.m.?
Yeah, wow, that is late. I mean, yeah, Australia, I think it's primarily because of, I presume it's heat, and it's just become a country, a nation standard thing. But 8 a.m. is typical kind of race start time. I've signed up for the half I did last year. I've got 2 marathons this year, and I've got a 5K next month. All of them are Sunday, 8 a.m. So it's definitely coming across as though that is the peak time, and for me that's perfect because for those that don't know, I'm a personal trainer. I start work at between 5:15 and 5:30 in the morning, and so likelihood is on race day I'm going to be up from at least 5 a.m. So getting it done 8 a.m. is no problem. Whereas I think if it was a 10 a.m. start, or I've heard of, I can't remember which one, it was one a couple of months back, but might have been Valencia one of the races started at 1 p.m. or something. And I was like, man, I've lived 3-4 lives by that point. I'm getting ready for bed.
Yeah, Australia's
yeah.
definitely it's a different way of life. We mentioned coffee last week very briefly, and I think there's a bit of controversy over your comment on London coffee beating Melbourne coffee. I don't know, mate. I think that one's very much up for debate because Melbourne coffee is, for me, that's the home of the specialty stuff. Anyways, listen, we'll not digress too much on that. But when I was working in the coffee shop with yourself, I was also working in another cafe right next to where we lived, and I was in there from like you say, 5:30, 5:45 every morning. And similarly, you were never working later than probably 1:30 in the afternoon. And then you couldn't get a coffee anywhere after that. Whereas, yeah, here in Ireland, here in the UK, it's a little bit of a different lifestyle. So it's just a cultural thing, I think. London, it does start pretty late for road races. You know, generally speaking, we start road races sort of 9 a.m, sometimes 10. But yeah, 10 o'clock's pretty late. But I guess it's probably to allow for the logistics of everything, let everyone get out to the start line. You know how big a city London is. But I guess then you have New York that starts out on the island and you have to get a ferry out. And it starts, I think, really early. I don't know. It's one of those things. Anyways, listen, I've had a really good week. Yeah, I've had a good week of training. Do you want me to go through the week of training?
Yeah, why not? I mean, like, look, at the end of the day, we've just spent 6 minutes talking about nothing. So, and I've loved every second of it. So hopefully the listeners have too. But yeah, I want to hear about your training because I am obviously super curious to hear how your marathon prep is going. Like, again, I think I've learned already quite a lot just from observing what you've been doing. And we've obviously been chatting off air for like quite a while now. It's been about a year and a half on and off. So yeah, how's the week gone?
Yeah, so I'll kick it off from Monday. I'm not going to go into everything in too much detail. It's, you know, I could talk for an hour about the training, but Monday morning started off with an easy 10-mile run. That was coming off the back of the long run last Sunday. Started with an easy 10 miles, followed by an easy 45-minute jog in the evening with some strides. So double day. Tuesday was much the same. 12 miles in the morning. I think that 12-mile run was a little bit more moderate, so our body was really starting to come around and recover, so getting a little bit faster. Not fast by any means, absolutely nowhere near marathon pace, but just starting to move a little bit. The body was starting to get freed up. I think the strides helped that on Monday evening. And then on Tuesday evening, I did the same, 45 minutes, very, very, very slow, just really focusing on my recovery and getting some extra volume in the legs. But on the Tuesday evening, I added in some of that speed as well. So I did 8 hill sprints. And those hill sprints are off a really full recovery, like a walking recovery for at least 90 seconds. Wednesday is kind of my big workout at the minute. So Wednesday, I got stuck into sort of the main workout for the week, which kind of treating as like the marathon specific workout. And that will become more specific as I get closer to the marathon itself. So 3-mile easy jog to begin, just to warm the body, really slow. It's pretty cold this day, so I was well rugged up, had the jacket on, the beanie, the gloves, the tracksuit bottoms, everything, hence the amount of washing that I've been doing recently. And then I get into a session that I pretty much pulled together on the morning of the workout. Just kind of at the minute I'm deciding what I need, when I need it, and I'm kind of designing a workout around that. So I did what I would call a tempo pyramid. It was 8 minutes, 12 minutes, 20 minutes, and then back down the other side, 12 minutes and 8 minutes. And I kind of got progressive as that workout went on. So I started pretty relaxed at around or slightly slower than marathon pace. And I built to marathon pace or just under marathon pace for the 20-minute section. And then as I came back down the other side of that pyramid, I got a little bit quicker and finished much closer to my lactate threshold and probably even slightly over it. Those were all off a 1-minute jog, so I couldn't cook that session early because 1 minute just goes in like that. And when you're doing those longer reps, if you're going too hard, you're just never going to recover in time. So that was a pretty beefy morning. I think the session was 11 miles and the warm-up cool down was 6 miles in total. So pretty beefy morning. Just under 30 Ks probably. Then the evening time.
Cobbins? Sorry, just to interject there. Was that in Cobbins?
That session was in the Alpha Fly 3. I also fueled that session pretty well. So I had 2 gels during the session, one caffeine gel closer to the start of the session, followed by a regular gel later in the session. And I also took on board 500 mils of just Lucozade Sport, which is just an isotonic sports drink, throughout that session. So I felt really good. I just find, especially as the session goes on and the body starts to fatigue, having those carbs in throughout the session helps up. It helps massively. And then similarly after the session, I always kind of I can gauge how well I'm going to recover from a session by how good I feel in the cool down. And when the body kind of wants to go a little bit in your cool down, I always think that's a good sign. That was good. Thursday is like a proper recovery day for me. So it was 45 minutes really slow in the morning and 45 minutes really slow in the evening. Actually met up with my cousin in the evening for the evening run. We ended up doing about 52 minutes just with the loop that we were on. That was nice and slow, nice and relaxed, just chatting. Friday morning, got out for an 11-mile run. I'm kind of treating my weekends at the minute as like a training weekend, if you will. So Friday kicks off depending on how I'm feeling, but if I feel pretty good, which I did this day, I'll run at like a moderate intensity / kind of steady. So I did 11 miles and sort of averaged about 6:45 per mile. I don't even know what these are in Ks. I should know, but I don't. So that was kind of getting moving a little bit towards the end. Again, very much in control. Still about a minute slower than what I want to run in the marathon per mile, but just starting to, I guess, get moving again and bank some good time on feet. That was an hour and 17. Rested up Friday evening, and then, like I say, I'm sort of treating the weekend at the minute as like a training weekend. So I've kind of found this nice routine or rhythm to my weekends that I'm enjoying. So instead of doing a really big marathon specific workout in the middle of my long run like I did in the past for previous marathons, I'm doing a shorter, faster session on the Saturday morning, followed by like a easy to moderate long run on the Sunday. So I'm kind of taking the specific work out of the long run, which lots of people might disagree with, but it seems to be working nicely for me at the minute. And as I get closer to the marathon, I may introduce some specific work into the long run and drop that Saturday session. But I feel like I'm getting really good bang for my buck at the minute from this. So Saturday morning was, again, easy 3-mile jog to warm up, change the shoes, get ready to go. And I did 12 minutes steady to begin at around marathon pace. I took a 2-minute recovery, which I kind of started by walking and finished with a jog. And then I went straight into 15 times 1 minute efforts with about a 45-second rest. So this is the only workout of the week that I actually looked at my heart rate, because between those 1 minute efforts, I was just letting my heart rate drop down to around, that's the same number where I kind of know I'm good to go again. 1 minute efforts were just on feeling. I wasn't really looking at my watch during those. The goal of those is to kind of move at what feels like somewhere between 5k and 10k effort, but without getting too bogged down in the pace. Like if you're going up a hill or you're running into a headwind, you don't need to be worrying about the pace in those efforts at all. And also I want to think about moving really efficiently during those. So I'm just not trying to force it, always maintaining really good running economy, because I know not only is that going to benefit me from a fitness perspective, but I've got the long run on a Sunday morning. So I got to be ready and got to be fresh to run that long run on a Sunday. So 15 by 1 minute efforts with about a 45-second rest, give or take. And then another 2-minute recovery after the end of those. And I finished with like 10 minutes at my lactate threshold. So I started at about marathon pace, but progressively built down to closer to my half marathon pace at the end of that session, followed by 3-mile cool down. Sunday morning, got up, met the lads, and we did a 20-miler. So we headed out over some lovely country roads. It wasn't a great morning. It was raining, but the company always helps. We got 20 miles in, averaged 7-minute mile on the dot. It's kind of like a progressive run as well. So we started really slow, really relaxed. We just rolled out 4 or 5 miles at very, very chilled out pace. And then we kind of got going a little bit. We got down to sort of 6:20, 6:30s. But again, it felt really relaxed, really good. We were nice and warm, fueling throughout the session, well fueled the day before. And we kind of got progressive as that went on. So that was the week, man. Pretty big volume, and a really good week of training, and I'm feeling good. I should also mention a big shout out to Ivan, the masseuse. I had a massage on Wednesday, and I also managed to sneak into the sauna for a couple of little sessions in the sauna. I just love to get into the sauna when the weather's pretty cold outside to get a bit of heat in the bones, you know.
Honestly, I think I'm going to miss the forest completely here for the trees and highlight that, man, I love saunas so damn much. That's probably I think my goal in life, Adam, is I'll know I've made it when I've got a sauna in my house, if ever. Just because, like, again, I was fortunate enough that I'm so going down this rabbit hole now, but I lived in 2 apartments back to back for the best part of about 2.5 years when I first came to Australia. Both had saunas built into the complex, and I'm not joking, I was probably using the sauna like 4 or 5 times a week, every week for the majority. This was around COVID, so obviously, like, take COVID and restrictions out of the way, and when we were allowed to, I was saunaing so hard, and it's the best. Like, man,
it's hard to beat. It's hard to beat. It makes me feel amazing, do you know? And I mean, just afterwards, I feel very relaxed, very chilled. Energy always feels like it's in a nice place. You know, not fully aware of all of the benefits. I know there's a lot of scientific research around sauna and heat shock protein, and you know, there's a lot of stuff. But I just feel great. I love when I'm in it because I love. Lots of people love the ice bath. Lots of people have the loomy little baths out their back. That's not for me. Couple of the boys that I run with have one, and after their runs in the winter, they'll jump out into that ice bath, and it's just like, nah, I'm going home for a hot shower, or I'm jumping into the sauna if I'm lucky. And I don't have a sauna at my house, by the way. I just want to get that in there. The sauna's not at home. I wish it was, but it's not. So yeah, any chance that I get to jump over to the sauna, I grab it with both hands. So got that in a couple of times this week, and it was great. Yeah, it was great.
It's funny you mention all those things because I think, like, again, I've dabbled in ice baths, I've dabbled in saunas. I've actually looked into quite a lot of research into, like, around hypoxia, which is basically the adaptation you get as a result of heat training and altitude as well. So for those that don't know, heat training is essentially like a poor man's altitude training. It's via different mechanisms, but essentially you're getting the same outcome, which is, if you commit to it long enough, you're getting an increase in red blood cell count. Red blood cells, again, for those that don't know, they transport oxygen around the body. If you have more of these kind of higher red blood cell count, in theory, you're going to be better able to transport oxygen to the cells. Again, I'm always someone that's like, man, I got to know the research. I got to know everything, even though, again, I'm probably missing for the forest for the trees. But yeah, I couldn't agree more with the statement around just how, at the end of the day, if you enjoy something and you tell yourself it works, it is going to work whether you like it or not. So if you are forcing yourself to get into the ice bath and you hate it and it stresses you out, that's going to do absolutely, or maybe not nothing, but very little compared to sitting in I get in the bath after a run just to, like, calm down my nervous system, and I feel so good afterwards. So yeah,
100%. Anything that helps you to relax is going to help your training. I mean, I'm not jumping in the sauna for any kind of training benefit or stimulus. I'm not watching my heart rate. I don't even time the thing. You know, like, I know a lot of people, they'll be looking at their heart rate and they'll be timing how long they're in there and, you know, have a sauna protocol, so to speak. I just think anything that makes you feel relaxed and feel good, it's going to help your training anyway, because, you know, a healthy athlete is going to be a good athlete, and a happy athlete is going to be a good athlete. And if you're relaxed, then anything that helps you feel good is only going to aid things. And I always try to, you know, explain to people that if you can tick the big buckets, i.e. the training, the sleep, the nutrition, you're 99% of the way there. But then any little thing that you add into your week, you got to be careful too. I always think cost versus impact, and not necessarily the financial cost, but maybe the cost on, like, your energy, or the cost on, like, your family time, or the cost on your work. You have to really weigh up that cost versus impact analysis. And yeah, if it costs very little from an energy, financial, XYZ point of view, and it has high impact, then yeah, it's a great thing. So for me, sauna is one of those little things. I don't have a routine on it. Just if I have the chance to go, I go. The other thing that I should mention is, if I have a race or a big key session, I'm always very, very conscious not to spend too much time in there. So on race week, let's say I'm racing on a Sunday, I'm definitely not using the sauna after, like, Tuesday of that week, just to ensure that I'm not risking dehydration. Like, it does take a little bit out of the body. Obviously the heart rate goes up, and it's quite extreme heat. So yeah, you just want to be careful not to listen to your own body and know your own body. But yeah, I just don't want to feel flat on race day. And so after about Tuesday of race week, I'm not in the sauna.
Yeah, and I think that's, again, because I guess we're fortunate enough to have viewership most likely coming from the UK and Australia. Like, as someone who I trained for years, I've run and I've cycled at some point in the UK, where the climate's obviously very different to here in Melbourne. And I've done long runs. I've run in like 40-degree heat in Melbourne, which again, I think people should like approach very cautiously. Do as I say, not as I do. But even this week, I've had multiple runs in above 30-degree temperatures. And like when I say you like, the thirst is actually unreal at some points, like not necessarily immediately after or during the run, because like your nervous system's so worried about completing the session and just kind of making it through. But give it like an hour and a half, and you find out if you've kind of not done enough in terms of your hydration. And so again, for anyone who is in Australia, like, take hydration super seriously if you're running, and that's not just water but electrolytes as well. Like, really, like, take that into consideration. And
100%.
yeah, look, if you're someone that does typically struggle in the heat, like, it's just not worth being a hero. Like, for me, I'm pretty confident I can make it through most hot runs. I've done it a lot, but yeah, it's just not worth it otherwise.
No, good on you. Yeah, I do remember one day going for a run. Do you know what? It was Halloween day. So it was October 3rd or October 31st? I can't even remember.
31st, yeah.
Yeah, I can't even remember how many days October has. But anyways, I went out for a run and it was 40 degrees. And man, I'll never forget it, having to stop at those drinks fountains along the beachfront in like Elwood in Melbourne. Just stopping at every single one to drink because I was so cooked. But I think it's important to remember as well, even if you're living somewhere in a really cold climate like we are at the minute, where we're getting no heat at all, it can be really easy to miss out on your hydration and forget to drink. I notice that quite a bit. My wife Kira, she wouldn't be the best at drinking water, and I'm always at her. I keep the thing that I always say to her is, what happens to a plant that doesn't get any water? Think about it, just to try and encourage her to drink more water. I think a lot of, especially people that do some training in the cold, it can be really easy to forget to drink because you're just like, it's cold, I'm not thirsty, blah blah blah. I think it's important to remember to drink because you are still sweating. You're still utilizing a lot of the water that you're taking on board. I mean, listen, we need water whether we're training or whether we're not training. But yeah, I think in the summer we remember to drink because it's warm, and in the winter sometimes we forget. So I just always try to have the bottle beside me and always keep it filled up. And yeah, it's just one of those little things. Once you have that habit, it sticks, doesn't it?
That's exactly right. And ultimately, we've just spent 15 minutes to tell you guys to stay hydrated. That is the moral of this story. We can stop the podcast now. That is it.
Listen, why don't you take me through your week?
Yeah, no,
Let me hear
we
a little bit about your training.
Now, but before we do, there was actually a couple of things I wanted to hear about yours before we get into mine. Firstly, like, obviously, it sounded like, at least to me, that was quite high mileage. What is your total mileage?
Yeah, that was 102 miles. So that was a pretty decent week of training. So that's like 164 Ks maybe?
Yeah, just over 160, which is massive.
So that is
double what I'm doing for the record. That's huge.
It's a lot. I mean, I want to run fast, so volume definitely helps. I found it helps me for sure. I'll probably go up a little bit further than that in this block if the body plays ball and I feel good. But yeah, that was last week, 102 miles.
Just on that thought, actually, this has just popped in my head. Do we have a theoretical or even a practical limit? What is the most you think you could handle or anyone can handle? Like, what are the professionals doing? Do we know?
It varies. It's such an individual thing. And I always talk about this volume versus intensity thing, You could go out there and run 160 miles a week or over 220, 230, 240 Ks if you're not doing any intensity whatsoever and you're willing to go out and be very bored a lot of the time. So I always talk about volume versus intensity. As soon as you start to crank up the intensity, even just above that easy range, as soon as you start to go through that sort of moderate to steady range into the threshold spectrum and beyond, you're really starting to add in that intensity piece. And it's that intensity coupled with volume that can be a recipe for disaster if you don't get it right. So, I mean, if you want to just go out and plod around for 24 hours, 25, 26 hours a week, I always talk about volume from a time perspective as well, because I think it's important to remember that everyone isn't out there running at the same pace. And so 102 miles for me is very different to 102 miles for someone else. So I prefer to talk about it in terms of time. It was like, I think it was 12 and a half hours of running. So I think that puts it into perspective a little bit easier for people. You can kind of, you can kind of make more sense of it. I mean, elite marathon runners are doing upwards of 200 Ks, man. It's big mileage, but those guys and girls, they're training, eating and sleeping. That is pretty much their life. I know there are a few heroes out there who are pro athletes or maybe they're not pro athletes, should I say. For example, Kevin Seward from Ireland here. I mean, that guy's a full-time vice principal at a school and he's training that kind of volume, so that is incredible. I think people like that are amazing because they're fitting it all in, they're recovering, they're doing their everyday job. I mean, the man's a teacher, which is incredible, and he's running that kind of volume. So yeah, I think once your body's adapted and you kind of know your body and you know where your limits lie, and you always want to work well within your limits as well. You don't want to be pushing that limit every single week because eventually the body's just going to crack. And when you're on that limit, you're tired, you're a little bit cranky all the time. Maybe sleep is starting to become interrupted. I mean, we're starting to talk about sort of verging on that overtraining, and I kind of know when I'm in a good spot as well because my day-to-day energy is always in a really good place when I'm in that good sweet spot. And touch wood, that's where I'm at the minute. But yeah, man, the elites, they're doing some big miles. The elite marathon runners, and I mean nowadays we touched on aerobic training last week, and kind of don't want to gloss over that too quickly because there is so much more to it. But even the likes of the middle distance, the 1500 meter runners, they're running high volume as well. That's that aerobic. I mean, when they're in base training, for sure, they're running upwards of 160 Ks a week as well to training to run 3.5 minutes on a track, so yeah, it's that volume thing, that they're running a lot of miles.
Yeah, I think that's one thing I've learned over, I guess, the last year of training and doing research into running is that volume is seriously king. And yeah, I follow Victor Smangs from Runners FM, and he's a 10K runner. That's his thing. And I think that was the first time just seeing what his training looked like and seeing he was doing, I think, something similar, upwards of 160 Ks a week. And I was like, yeah, okay. Maybe it's not just the marathon runners that are doing high mileage, it's actually the short distance runners, because ultimately that aerobic base, which is going to come from a lot of low to low moderate mileage, that's where the speed is ultimately going to come from. And then upon that, you maybe have 10% of the high intensity stuff, and that's really just the icing on the cake to give you that kind of anaerobic stimulus, really.
Yeah, and I mean, you should also touch on the fact that it's very individual, and you should take the time to kind of work out what works for you. And when I'm coaching someone, I kind of sometimes experiment with a couple of different things. And the important thing to think about as well as working out what is right for you is, what about your background? What have you done in the past? Have you been, for example, I've coached quite a few people that have come to me from other sports. They've played soccer, they've played GAA, they've played rugby, they've played field sports throughout their childhood, and they have a really good aerobic base, and that doesn't, like we mentioned last week, that doesn't just go away. You kind of have to do a little bit of work to find it again, but you don't have to do anywhere near as much work as someone that hasn't come from that background. And so when you coach someone that's come from that background, it's a really exciting prospect, because you kind of know if you can keep them healthy, because that's the key thing there, is keeping them healthy, not allowing them to do too much too soon. They're going to fly. And you always got to think about that, because you've got the cardiovascular system in one hand. So you're training that, the heart, the lungs, the blood, the physiology. And then you also have the musculoskeletal system in the other hand, which is the muscles, bones, tendons, ligaments. And if someone comes to you with a really well-trained cardiovascular system because they've been involved in sport, but that musculoskeletal system hasn't been doing a lot of running on the roads, you have to be so careful with that athlete, because cardio is really strong, but the body isn't as strong. I used a couple of analogies last week. I love, you can tell that I like to teach, but I always talk about the Formula One car going around the track, you know, and it doesn't matter what driver you put in that car. And this is the physiology here, the heart, the lungs, the blood. Doesn't matter who that driver is, but if the car is not in good shape, if the musculoskeletal system isn't in good shape, or the front wings hanging off, you know, or the tire isn't the pressure in the tires isn't enough, that car isn't going to go around that track very fast. And I kind of like to use that analogy when I'm speaking to someone who has come from other sports and knows they're fit and knows they're getting fitter. It's like, let's look after the musculoskeletal system here and your muscles, your bones, your tendons, your ligaments, because if those aren't in good shape, if you're not moving well, you're not going to go around the track very fast. You're not going to race very fast, despite how well trained and how fit you are, you know?
Yeah, honestly, and it kind of works the other way as well. Again, I speak to a lot of people in my line of work that kind of want to get into field sports, in team sports. They go for a few runs and then just expect that their body is ready to go and be able to play something like football, where there's a lot of kind of sharp movements, there's lateral movements, it's a different turf. And then within a week, they're like, yeah, got knee problems, got calf problems, got adductor problems. It's like, well, yeah, of course, you're going to, like, the concept of specificity is that you're going to get the adaptations for what you train for. If you've trained to play field sports where there's a lot of like sharp turns, it's a lot of kind of short glycolytic sprints, you're never going to, not never, sorry, but you're going to have a hard time kind of just jumping right into big weeks of just long distance running, because you're not used to that kind of impact from the road. You're going to have a hard time just kind of dealing with the different pressures that you're putting on the soft tissues and on the muscles. So yeah, really, really good point there for anyone who is getting into running from a different kind of discipline, I suppose.
Yeah, and then you throw age into the mix, and as we age, it doesn't get any easier. You know, we're not as pliable as we are when we're youngsters, and as adaptable to things. You know, when you're young, you can jump into anything, you know, throughout childhood, throughout your teenage years generally. You can kind of jump into whatever you want and give it a crack and progress quite quickly. But yeah, you have to be a little bit more patient as you get older. And I want to be careful there when I talk about age and getting older, because it's just only in your head. I was going to say,
are we basically admitting now that we've both hit 30 that we're essentially old?
No, I'm not admitting that, mate. No.
Okay. Look, there's some days, I'll be honest with you, where I have to remind myself I'm 30, because I'm like, I feel great, I'm doing heaps. There's other days where I catch myself like making weird dad noises on the sofa, and I'm like, yeah, I'm so 30. I'm like so 30. And even Nicole, my partner, she'll catch me doing like weird dad things. And I'm like, yeah, I'm that person now. Like, it's inevitable.
As long as you're not telling bad dad jokes, mate. You know, my dad is a desperate man for telling what I would call dad jokes, and every time one comes out of his mouth, I'm just like, not again.
Adam,
again.
you have no idea. It's like, you don't have a choice. Like, as soon as my son was born, I was pretty much in the labor room, like cracking jokes to the midwives, man. It just happens. You just gotta let it happen. Just be a dad, and
it's just part of it.
It's part of life, man.
I'd love to hear a little bit about your training week, mate. Let's go through it.
Yes, my training week, man. So I've technically just finished I suppose I've got one more day off. So the way my week is working, I start out Monday as an easy 10K, and that is followed by 6 hill strides. So I don't go for a massive hill just because I don't really have anywhere I'm running, because I go from work. But that's like a super controlled, it's an easy 10K. Like, that takes me just over 50 minutes. So I'm running about like 5:05 to 5:10. And that's like conversational pace. I do check my heart rates for all of my runs, more because I'm quite new to the sport relatively. I want that insight. I want to know what my heart rate is doing across like the different tempos. So unless it's like super hot, I do pay attention. So like if it's spiked up a little bit, I'll be like, okay, maybe today isn't a 5:05 day, maybe today's a 5:15 day. And I'll try and listen to that where I can, just to help me learn how things feel. I like having that objectivity to match that. And then again, the hill strides to finish, that's just to get me used to kind of opening the legs up a little bit and having a bit of quicker leg turnover. And then Tuesday, that's my first workout of the week. I'm on the treadmill for that one. So I'm doing 3K warm up. I'll change into the carbon fibers. I've got a pair of Alpha Fly 3s for those as well. And I'll do 6 by a mile at my LT2 pace, which is LT1, which is about like 4:05 per K, which is, again, I feel like it feels harder than it actually is, but that's because it's in a hot gym. It's in what is quite, I guess it's a small gym, but what I'm getting at is there's nothing to look at. There's nothing to take away from what you're doing. It's just like all you know is you're running, and that's it. So it's the psychological aspect.
Yeah, I get that.
Yeah, I mean, even this past week, I couldn't find the fan at the gym, and I probably should have looked a little bit harder. And even without a shirt on, like, my God, I probably lost about, and this isn't an over exaggeration, I probably lost about 1.5 to 2 liters of sweat in that run. Like, I'm talking like saturated. My shorts were saturated because that's all I was wearing. Like, literally, that was it, and dripping.
Is there anywhere the listeners can see Luke without a shirt?
100%. So that is OnlyFans. We are gonna link that. No, I'm joking.
That'll be the Patreon version.
Yeah, 100%. But we can make it happen. No, we can't. I'll get in big trouble. Big trouble. But yeah, no. So on my Instagram, every so often,
sorry, mate, post. I'm just picturing you in nothing but a pair of split shorts.
Man, to be honest with you, I look pretty good.
Like 7 o'clock in the morning, and I'm picturing you in yeah. Let's move on.
Your day is not getting any better after seeing me in my shorts. Yeah, honestly, if you do, like, jokes aside, all our runs, both mine and Adam's runs, are on Strava. So if you ever actually want to see a bit of insight, I like to post sometimes my heart rate data. I post little videos, especially of my indoor runs, just so people can see what I'm doing. So that will actually
aren't on Strava. My runs aren't.
There you go. Oops.
No, do you know what, mate? Sorry about that. I've been posting the very odd run recently. I went off Strava. I touched very briefly on the health problems that I had in 2023 last week, but when I started to come back from that, I just was like, yep, I'm getting off Strava. I don't need to be on there because I'm building back my training very, very slowly, very gradually. And I was just like, yep, I don't really want to be on there and comparing my training to others and thinking like that's where I need to be and so on. I just thought, you know what, I'm going to remove that layer of stress from my life, and I haven't come back on since. I've just enjoyed just having it where it's just me and my training, and I feel more relaxed about it. And so I have been posting the odd little thing here and there, you know, the odd long run or the odd session, or, you know, it's great to kind of, especially when you're coaching, to sort of show people a little bit about what you're doing. So I think maybe in time I probably will come back on there, but for now everything isn't on there. So I'm going to have to start posting more regularly and putting some more runs up there.
I think you are, because I want to see it, and my runs are on Strava. So we have to. What do you mean? We have to compare each other now. Like it's just the way it's
that's my Strava, mate.
There you go. Old school. I like it.
Yeah.
To be honest with you, I know you're running in a Garmin Forerunner 945, if I'm correct.
That's right.
I mean,
good on you, man.
That's basically doing what Strava does anyway. Because I mean, I'm running in the 955, and it's set that it picks it up on my Garmin. Obviously, all my runs are programmed into the Garmin, and then they automatically go to Strava. So it's like, well, the runs are there. If you're wearing a watch and you're setting it on the watch, like Strava's nice, but it's not necessary.
Yeah, I've also been thinking about, we've gone down a bit of a rabbit hole here, but I've also been thinking recently about my watch now. I actually bought this watch in Australia. It's like, it's just over 5 years old, so it's done me well. And I was thinking recently, because I replaced the strap a few times because the strap just seems to wear away after a certain amount of time of just wearing it day to day. But I was thinking the other day, if this watch kicked the bucket and died on me, would I replace it? I was kind of thinking, it might be a good opportunity to just go to raw dog it for a while, you know, to go.
Just now to go, I'm interested.
Just to go the old Casio watch and just time my runs, you know, do all of my running to time and to feeling. Maybe just for like a year or so and see how that went. So I've been debating that for a little while, because when I record my training in the diary, I generally just write the time as opposed to the distance. Occasionally I'll write in the distance, like if I do a long run, I'll write in the distance. But everything else is all off time. Like my sessions are all based off time. So yeah, Casio watch would do it, and I think it would be quite a cool experiment, or just quite a cool, just to go back to that kind of Yeah, I mean, that's how they did it back in the day. And I've had athletes ask me like, oh, how do you do that? And how do you possibly run on feeling? And I've actually I've had this conversation recently with quite a few athletes, especially when they're going out to race a 5K or 10K, and they've been like, how do I pace this? Just like, don't pace it. Go out there, find the right effort throughout the first like 800 meters to a kilometer. Just find the intensity that you feel like is right, and just run the race as hard as you can from there, and you know, gauge the effort based on the distance that you have available, or the distance that you have left to race, and race the people around you. You know, have that instinct where you're like, you know, yeah, I want to beat that person, or I want to catch that person that's up the road, or just whatever, you know, frame it in your own head whichever way you want. And I think there's a lot to be said for that. And again, feeling-based running and effort-based running is probably a conversation for a podcast in itself. I think now there's a massive over-reliance on data, and I think it's great to have some data, and this is where the science versus the art comes into play, and I think good coaching and good running needs both. But yeah, that's maybe an experiment for when this Garmin kicks the bucket. Or you know what, maybe I'll just ditch it, mate. Maybe I'll just get rid of it now and go Casio.
Man, I'm not sure how to feel about this. I mean, on the one side of things, like I love metrics, man. I love data. I love knowing things in the game. But I think it's because I come from that personal training, that resistance training background where you're measuring reps, you're measuring loads, you're measuring RPE, reps in reserve, whatever it might be. So, and I don't know, I just love knowing the details, but then I also really want to see how you get on. And to be honest with you, I 100% agree. I think we get so bogged down in heart rates, in like even things down to like people tracking sleep, heart rate variability, so on and so forth. I really want to see it. So maybe ditch Garmin and give it a go. Just do it. Give it a year. We'll see how we go.
Yeah, maybe. And I mean, like, I think it's one of those things, mate. You'll probably have this full circle moment over the next few years where you're very data driven in your approach, and then you start to get a little bit sick of the data, and you're like thinking about other ways in that you can think about your running. And you probably will have that kind of, I think it is a full circle thing where once you've been doing it for enough time and you really understand intensity and you really understand your body, and that experience comes along, I think most people will start to be like, yeah, I don't really need this watch. And I mean, man, 99% of my runs, my watch is covered because I'm wearing long sleeves, and I actually purposely put the sleeve over the watch, and I don't have auto lap on, so my watch doesn't beep. I actually switched that off before London Marathon in 2022, and I haven't switched it back on again. So my watch doesn't give me a mile split or a kilometer split every K. It just keeps rolling. So a run is just a single big lap. So I have no idea what my splits are when I'm actually running. And even when I do a session, all I'm thinking about is the feeling, do you know? And another little analogy that I like to use is, you know, you're a car driving down the motorway, and you just want, when you're doing a training session or a run, you just want to keep all those engine warning lights off. You don't want the lights flashing at you going crazy saying you got to replace the oil, or you got to do this, you got to do that. You just want to keep it nice and steady and nice and in that nice sweet spot. Keep driving down that motorway, and as long as you kind of know and understand the principles of training, and you understand and know exactly what you're trying to get from a session, and you understand the purpose of the session, and you're disciplined enough to kind of stick within those parameters, I mean, man, like that's it, do you know?
It's actually, it's funny you bring up the lap splits, because I mean mine's still set to kind of go off every K, and I was thinking for the marathon, because again for the 5K I've got in March, I will probably keep it on just because I've never run a 5K before, and I do want to kind of pay attention to it. But I think over 4K, even if it was set to like every 5K, I think that would be somewhat off-putting. I guess the worry would be is if you've got a time in your head, which like most people will, and your watch is going off and you might be hitting your splits, but then you could end up thinking like, man, I can't maintain this. Like, man, this is not good. That's going to screw with your head bad. So to be honest,
100%.
I think I'll probably end up turning that off as well. And like, obviously I'll have my watch on me, but I don't want that every like 4 minutes going off. And yeah.
And I think the really important point to note for anyone that's listening is that GPS isn't accurate. Do you know, your GPS is not measuring the mile or the kilometer that accurately. Okay, it's thereabouts, it's ballpark, but I mean, if you've ever ran a big city marathon before, you've probably on your watch came out with nearly 27 miles. And I just, at this point has just popped into my head is like, people putting up, it's a bit of a gripe of mine, and I hope I don't offend anyone. Actually, you know what, mate? If I offend someone, I'm sorry, but
Yeah,
this just has to be said. Always try to be politically correct, but no. People running marathons and basically quoting their marathon time as like the time that Strava says they ran the marathon in. They finished the marathon, it's been like 0.5 miles on Strava because that's what their GPS watch measured. I'm sorry, but you have ran a marathon. That's a measured course. It's an officially measured course. You've ran 26.2 miles. Maybe you've ran a little bit more if you've ran around the tangents, but it doesn't matter. You've ran a marathon. That's similarly if you run a 10K race and it's an officially measured course, you've ran 10K, so on and so forth. I think you get the point. But you can't quote your time as the Strava time or the time that your Garmin told you run 26.2 mile in. You ran the time that is your chip time, and that's it.
Yep.
Okay, I'm not even hearing anything else. I know you agree with me, but there's a lot of people out there that they quote their marathon time as the Strava time.
I wouldn't even say that's controversial. I'd say that's common sense. Like otherwise, they wouldn't like be writing it down off the chip time, right? You wouldn't have that at all if it wasn't official. So the thought of doing anything otherwise is beyond me.
And we've just lost half of our listeners.
Yep. See you later.
No,
good riddance.
No, I'm just
joking. Yeah, no, really good points there. And man, I should probably finish off talking about my training week.
We got to Tuesday. Apologies.
Yeah, no, 2 days in. That's good. That's it, man. What happened on Wednesday? So yeah, Wednesday I have another easy run. This time it's a little bit further, so I do K. But I should also mention that I do resistance training like intermittently throughout the week. So on my Monday session, I have, instead of like doing double runs, I'll do a resistance training session in the afternoon, and I have my run kind of mid-morning. And then Wednesday, similar thing. I had a bit more of an upper body session first thing in the morning, and then I'll go do that 12K at lunchtime. And again, that's similar thing. I'm running like 5:05 to 5:15, depending on like weather and how I'm feeling. Thursday, another easy one. So that's another 10K. But instead of hill sprints at the end of that, that is just straight flat line, 100 meters, 100 meter strides. That was a hard one this week. I think it was just like, again, it wasn't excessively hot. I think it was on my Instagram story, I said it was between 35 and 37. I actually think it was just below that. I think it was like 34, but I think it was just
exaggeration.
Slight exaggeration, hyperbole. I think it was just where the heat from the start of that week and even last week had just built up, and I felt really flat for that run. Like, did not feel good. To the point where I think even with the strides in there, I think my finishing pace was about like 5:20. So that one really dropped off, which is fine. Like, I'm not trying to break records with that run. That's literally just to get miles in my legs. And then today it is Friday. I had a LT2 session. I did that weird kind of 14 by 500 meters with a 3K warm up and 3K cool down.
That's the one. That's the session I messaged you about, wasn't it?
Yeah, you're laughing, but it makes sense because yes, once or twice I did it on a track, but near my house, and what I told my coach is I do actually have like a pretty perfect 500. It is the shape of a track. I joke not. And so it like lines up really perfectly. It's super flat. It's pretty well sheltered from the wind. So I did it around that. And again, I still feel a little bit flat just from the week. And I think potentially I am still kind of working out how much I need to fuel before certain sessions, because my volume hasn't changed much, but I think my general activity levels are quite high. And yeah, I'm just trying to find that balance between not necessarily how much I'm eating, but just like timing, because again, I've got like a super sensitive stomach, and I've found that if I eat too much before the run, that I run into like some real discomfort, and it's messed up my runs before. So today I had a relatively big breakfast around 6:30 a.m. And then I had like an energy bar, which would have been about 11:30. Right before the run, I had a scoop of cluster dextrin. So it was carved up, but I think potentially I should have had it earlier, because I could feel the carbs working. It might just be in my head, but I could feel the carbs working probably about halfway through the intervals. I felt like, okay, energy's picking up again. picking up a bit. And again, that might be just my nervous system getting fired up because I've just finished a work week. It's been hot. My activity levels are high, and I mean, stress is probably normal, but still it's there.
What did you have for the breakfast at 6:30?
Great question. So I had oats, about 80 grams of oats. I had 40 grams of protein powder, banana. I had some frozen berries and a little bit dark chocolate in there, mate, because I like to treat myself.
Did you have any honey?
No, I don't do honey. I don't have honey. I should start having some like maple syrup or something. I like maple syrup.
Well, at least you were carved up. It sounds like you probably had enough. I mean, if in doubt, I always think just go and have a little bit more during or before all of my sort of bigger runs and sessions now. I'm sort of eating that high carbohydrate diet anyways, but I'm always topping up with like a sports drink or a handful of sweets, something like that, or as you guys call them, lollies in Australia. Yeah, so I'm always topping up with that before a session. And you know what, mate? That little tweak where I'm having, I don't even know how many calories it is. It's probably about 150 calories worth of sweets before, like 20, 30 minutes before I run, maybe even less. That's helping me feel, I always feel like when I feel like I'm on top of the session, you know, sometimes you're the hammer, sometimes you're the nail. And that little carb hit has really helped me feel like I'm the hammer in those sessions, like I'm on top of the session as opposed to the session being on top of me. And that's how I describe it anyway, and that's how I think about it in my own head. But I feel like that little tweak has helped me massively.
Bro, that's got to be your nickname from now on. You are officially the hammer. So yeah, we're gonna change your name on all your socials. No, but I 100% get what you're saying. And to be honest with you, there was a time when I did actually I tried to eat a little bit more, probably about 45 minutes to half an hour before some of my more intense sessions, and I experimented with like cola bottles, and I had at one point I even tried donuts because someone brought in donuts to work, and I took some home, and again they just the only thing that seems to work are either gels, which as you can imagine was costing me a fortune popping a gel every time I did a workout. But now I'm onto the cluster dextrin, which is relatively inexpensive for as supplements go. Yes, it's probably more expensive than something like a maltodextrin or dextrose, but it sits really well, and you don't get the spike, the immediate kind of up and down that you get if you kind of nectar a Coca-Cola or something like that. It's kind of, I won't go into the physiology too much, but you get like a trickle of energy kind of from about half an hour after ingestion. But yeah, I think I might just have to, instead of just going for like the one scoop, I might even just try a scoop and a half, 2 scoops, and then even drink as I go. So start earlier and then kind of just continuously drink throughout that session. Yeah.
And you have to find what works for you. And that's the important thing, is just figure out what works for you. And generally especially when you're doing harder sessions or intervals or long runs, more carbohydrates during the session are better. You know, they aid recovery, they aid adaptation, they aid performance, they help delay fatigue. More carbohydrates is better, but of course you got to work out where's your sweet spot and what type of carbohydrates / what type of products actually work best for you. So that's the thing, mate. You're figuring that out, that's the most important thing.
Yeah, and I mean, again, I especially when I was doing longer runs, it was a little while ago where I was kind of hammering long runs every week. And again, I won't go into that now, but I even had a chance to test a few different gels, and I remember one time I had one from Coles. You remember Coles? We don't have Tesco or Sainsbury's here. We have Coles and Woolworths. Those are the two big chains. And Coles did this deal where it was 3 of these 20-gram carbohydrate endurance gels for $5, which is pretty good. Bear in mind the Morton gels that I have typically they're close to $5 per gel, so it's like a third of the price. And I had it, and I reckon within about half an hour of having it, I was getting the stomach gurgles, I was getting the kind of the cramps, the twisting. I was yeah, bro, I've got to be so careful with everything that I put in, because and I worked out, I think it's because it was just pure maltodextrin. There was no blend of glucose or fructose, which is the Morton gels, and the Morton gels are hydrogel as well, which typically digests a little bit nicer. This was basically just the cheapest form of carbs, probably with really crappy sweeteners, and it was just wreaking havoc. And needless to say, I did have to take a break from the run. And I'm not even ashamed to say it because I've spoken to a lot of my clients about kind of near misses during my runs. So
It's funny you say that.
yeah.
We had that conversation in our coaching webinar this week where we were talking about pre-run nutrition, and we had exactly the same conversation that we're having now. And I said, like, where I live, I know every public toilet. You got to know every public toilet in your local area. And touch wood, like, now that I know, it's a funny conversation to have, but now that I know what works for me, timing, type, all of that stuff, amount, and depending on what I'm doing from a training point of view, like, I can't remember the last time I needed to use the bathroom when I was training. So yeah, you find out what works for you, don't you? And you just crack on from there.
We might have to have a whole nother podcast about this because I think it's, again, this is like letting people into my life really in depth and a lot of people that I don't actually know. But long story short, I get like, I've got underlying anxiety like a lot of the time, and it's not really a funny thing, but I guess it kind of is because my response to being anxious is that I need to go to the toilet. Not necessarily like number two, but like if I tell myself that, oh, I'm ages away from a public toilet, my brain will go, yeah, dude, you need the toilet. You need to go like now. And I don't, and I can always hold it, but it's just like, that's the way my brain works. So we might have to have a conversation because one thing I'm genuinely quite worried about is losing time in my marathon because I need to like just go for a pee basically. And that might only be like realistically 20 to 30 seconds, but I don't really want to lose that time more than once. So we might have to like pencil that in for another day. But yeah, you're doing very well if you're not needing to go to the toilet at all.
Yeah. Are you still drinking coffee? Is that coffee you're drinking? No, it couldn't be. It's evening time.
This is my magnesium. I'm like getting ready for bed. I will like not be up for much longer than this. And
Are you drinking coffee at the minute?
Yeah. So
Just generally?
I've worked in coffee for years. Coffee is one of the main loves of my life after
Anyone that
my
doesn't
family.
know, Luke is an unbelievable barista.
I think he was.
He's a wizard.
Definitely was.
Yeah.
Maybe not so much anymore. I've got a coffee machine at home, but I'm not like paying too much attention to it. I just kind of make it so it tastes somewhat reasonable. But look, I'm quite conservative with my coffee intake because I love my sleep more than I love most things.
Because the anxiety thing plus the coffee, I know if I drink too much, I feel myself starting to get a little bit, anxious as well.
Yeah, no, believe it or not, I literally have a double shot like first thing in the morning. I'm talking around 5:30 in the morning, and that is the only caffeine I will have in the day. So it's more just, I think it's just the way my head works, to be honest with you. And it don't get me wrong, it's got a lot better, but there are times where like I'll go on a run, like I said, I'll know there's no toilets for a while, and look, I'm pretty easy. If I need to stop on the side of the road, I will. I've got no shame. I will go. But yeah, to be honest though,
moment.
Yeah, maybe not that bad. I'm not that bold, but if I was going for a world record, yeah, I probably would as well, to be honest with you. So yeah, toilet talk with Luke and Adam.
Yeah, we'll leave it there on the toilet talk. Did we manage to get through your week, man?
Pretty much. The only thing I would say is that technically I have my rest day is on Saturday, where I just do a little bit of upper body in the gym, and then I guess I finish my week on Sunday, or you could look at it as though I'm starting. But yeah, my Sunday run, so last week it was a progressive tempo where I did 40 minutes going from kind of just below my target marathon pace, working all the way up to just above my target marathon pace. That didn't really go to plan last Sunday because the weather was hectic winds, and near where I live it's quite hilly. So while I do try to stick to kind of progress pretty linearly across the tempos, it was all over the place, and I tried to pay attention to it. But when you're running uphill into a headwind, like there's no way I can get anywhere near my marathon pace. So I just kind of took what I could get, like tried to keep, like you said, intensity in a good place, and yeah. And that's obviously with that good old 3K warm up and cool down. That seems to be doing me good. And then this Sunday I have slightly different. It's another LT1. I'll do 5 by 2K with that 3K warm up and cool down. So I'm just kind of undulating between, and then expecting a new block of training to start next week. And yeah, we'll see how that goes.
Nice one. Cool. We managed to get there in the end.
We did, man.
Few talking points, but we got there.
It's literally taken us an hour to talk about our weeks of training. How good is that? Not
We'll
that
have
it
to-
wasn't productive.
We'll have to get a bit more efficient at that.
We will. But look, we have been chatting for an hour. We probably should start wrapping up. But is there anything you wanted to cover before we go our separate ways?
Yeah, so we've had I had a couple of DMs with a few questions to be asked on the podcast already. We're not going to answer those today. I've already told those people that asked those questions we will get to them. So really grateful for anyone that sort of sent in a little question that they'd like us to answer on the podcast. Again, I suppose we could do a Q&A episode at some stage. So if you have some questions, some burning questions that you'd like us to answer, for whatever reason you'd like us to answer them, please do send them in. That would be great. Also, I want to say good luck to anyone that I know or coach that is racing over the next week. I'm kind of conscious that we're recording on Friday morning and this episode goes out the next Wednesday, so we're kind of talking in the future. But there are a few good races happening locally here over the next week or so. The Armagh 3K and 5K, which is, I don't know if you've heard about it, but it's just this most unbelievable 5K race and 3K race. The 5K is like the more elite race, but you know, there's the field of athletes that is racing next week is outstanding. I actually think David, who coaches you, used to coach me. I believe he came second in that race one year, which is outstanding because it's a really stellar race. It really is. That's happening next Wednesday evening, so the day that this podcast goes out. So I've got a couple athletes running in the open 3K race. So if you're running there on tonight and you're listening to this, good luck. But yeah, mate, that's everything. I think it's back to the washing and eating lots of food and doing lots of running for me.
That's life. No, that's quite similar. I mean, my life's maybe in a way a little bit more hectic. So my weekends kind of revolve around the little ones. So that'll be me for the weekend, doing a little bit of editing. But yeah, I just want to wish all kind of the folks in Ireland again good luck for any races, and yeah, it'd be great to see hopefully some good results. And yeah, I think because we've got going into obviously race season, if anyone's ever like interested in racing alongside us, like if anyone's doing the Ballarat Marathon, or maybe not London, I know it's a little bit kind of harder, but I'm running a FK at Prince's Park in Colton, Victoria, Melbourne. But if anyone who happens to listen is running that, like let us know. I'd be great to like catch up, say hello on the start line and so on. And yes, I definitely think we should maybe lock in a Q&A episode in the coming weeks. I think that'd be a great job. Again, I can't think why anyone would want our opinion on anything, but you know what, let's do it. So yeah, and one last thing, again, we got some like really lovely messages on YouTube and through Spotify, on Instagram. So thanks so much for anyone who is taking the time to not only watch and listen, but comment and all this stuff. So if you do also get a chance to like download the episodes, follow us on all these platforms, it goes a long way in terms of like helping us get exposure. So yeah, thanks.
Share it
so
with
much.
your mates.
Yep. Share it with everyone. Share it with your dog. Your dog wants to listen. Your mum wants to listen. Everyone wants to listen.
She definitely wants to listen if she's picturing you, mate, in your split shorts. I thought we finished. I'm sorry.
I didn't want to be the one that said it, so I'm glad you did. Yeah, tell your mum I said what's up if you're watching. No,
okay, we'll stop now.
We should leave this. We're getting ahead of ourselves. So yeah, look, guys, I guess we will wrap up and just again say one more massive thank you. Again, new episodes out every Wednesday. Follow us on socials. You'll have all the links in the show notes. So thanks again, and we are looking forward to kind of making more pods for you over the next few weeks.